Who told you that man was allowed in here? Celeste Pike's voice cut across VIP room 1207 as Malcolm Reed lowered a steaming bowl of soup beside Evelyn Whitmore's untouched birthday cake. Noah stood against his father's coat, holding a crayon card with 3 people drawn around a table. A faded blue recipe card showed above Malcolm's apron pocket. Evelyn stared at it while Celeste reached for the bowl. "Don't," Evelyn whispered. By morning, her board would find Malcolm's full name inside her father's sealed will. 3 hours earlier, the hospital kitchen had smelled of bleach, roasted chicken, and stainless steel cooling beneath fluorescent lights. Malcolm worked the late shift with the practiced quiet of a man who could hear when a pot was beginning to scorch before anyone else noticed. His charcoal chef's coat was clean but faded at the cuffs. Beneath it, Nia's wedding ring rested on a chain against his chest, moving slightly whenever he leaned over the stove. Noah sat at the staff table finishing homework because the neighbor who usually watched him had been called into work. The 9-year-old had colored a birthday card during his break, though he did not yet know who would receive it. Near the service elevator, a tray returned from the VIP floor caught Malcolm's attention. The plastic seal was unbroken. Condensation had dried inside the lid, and the timestamp on the label showed the meal had been prepared more than 4 hours earlier. "Did they send the wrong tray back?" Malcolm asked. The orderly shook his head. "Room 1207. She didn't touch it." "Was another meal sent?" "Not that I saw." Malcolm checked the dietary code. Cardiac recovery, low sodium, soft texture. He looked toward the small container of chicken, rice, and vegetables he had set aside for himself and Noah. It was supposed to be their dinner after his shift. Noah followed his eyes. "We still have crackers," he said, patting his backpack. Malcolm said nothing for a moment. Then he washed his hands, tied on a fresh apron, and began cutting the vegetables smaller. He simmered the soup slowly, skimming the surface until the broth ran clear. He added no cream, no heavy seasoning, nothing that would make a weak stomach work harder than it should. Noah drew 3 bowls on his card instead of 2. At 8:47, they stepped from the service elevator onto the VIP floor. The carpet swallowed the sound of Malcolm's non-slip shoes. A recorded voice came through the ceiling speaker, warm and mechanical. "The staff of St. Catherine's wishes Evelyn Whitmore a very happy birthday." No one answered. Outside room 1207 hung a printed sign. "Family visit. Do not disturb." Through the narrow glass panel, Malcolm saw an older white woman sitting upright in bed beneath a pale blanket. A small cake stood near her elbow with every candle unlit. The guest chair remained pushed neatly beneath the window table. Celeste Pike appeared from the nurse's station, her navy uniform immaculate, her smile controlled. Kitchen deliveries stop at the desk. Malcolm held the bowl steady. Her dinner came back sealed. Ms. Whitmore declined it. Was it replaced? Celeste's smile thinned. That is not your concern. Noah tugged Malcolm's sleeve and looked through the glass. Dad, there's nobody in there. Celeste glanced down at his worn sneakers. Children aren't permitted to wander on this floor. Malcolm shifted one step so his body stood between her and Noah. Then speak to me. He's 9. Celeste reached for the bowl. Malcolm did not pull it away, but he did not release it either. He looked through the doorway at Evelyn. Ma'am, do you want me to leave? Or do you want something warm to eat? Evelyn studied him, then the child holding the handmade card. Her eyes moved to the bowl, and finally to the faded blue card rising from Malcolm's apron pocket. Her hand closed around the silver watch on her wrist. Let him in, she said. Celeste's fingers tightened around the edge of the tray. Ms. Whitmore, for your protection. I said let him in. Malcolm crossed the threshold only then. He placed the soup within reach of Evelyn's stronger hand, turned the spoon toward her fingers, and set Noah's card beside the untouched cake. Celeste stepped behind them and quietly removed the family visit sign from the door. As she folded it against her clipboard, Malcolm saw the printed patient code on the back, and beneath it, Celeste Pike's electronic authorization. Malcolm's eyes stayed on Celeste Pike's electronic authorization for 1 second too long. That sign was approved under your account, he said. It was placed there for patient privacy. There was no family inside. Celeste folded the sign until the printed code disappeared beneath her hand. The paper made a dry crease against her clipboard, sharp in the quiet room, while the hospital speaker faded into a low electrical hum above them. Evelyn watched from the bed without speaking, one hand still closed around her father's silver watch. Celeste turned toward the hallway and touched the radio clipped to her waist. Security to 1207. Non-emergency assistance. Her voice was soft enough to sound reasonable, almost protective. Malcolm heard the words for what they were. A professional way to turn a bowl of soup into a threat. 2 security officers arrived without rushing, their dark uniforms reflected in the glass cabinet beside the bed. One looked at Malcolm's charcoal chef's coat, then at Noah's worn sneakers and backpack before asking Celeste what had happened. Unauthorized access. The patient invited me in. Kitchen staff do not determine access. Malcolm kept one hand resting lightly on Noah's shoulder. He could feel the boy's breathing quicken beneath the fabric of his hoodie, so he bent and straightened the twisted strap of Noah's backpack as if that small task deserved all his attention. "Put anything you need to put in my file," Malcolm said. "But don't make him part of it. He's 9. Celeste's expression softened in a way that never reached her eyes. "No one is blaming your son, Mr. Reed. We are simply concerned that bringing a child onto a restricted floor may have been intended to create an emotional connection with a vulnerable patient." Noah lowered the card he was still holding. One corner had bent beneath his fingers. Malcolm gently took it from him, smoothed the crease with his thumb, and placed it back beside Evelyn's cake. "He made a birthday card," Malcolm said. "That's all he intended. People in difficult financial situations do not always recognize how their actions may appear," Celeste replied. Her gaze moved briefly to the faded cuffs of Malcolm's coat, then to the inexpensive watch on his wrist. "We have to protect patients from anyone who might misunderstand kindness as access." The word anyone hung in the room longer than it should have. Evelyn's eyes shifted from Celeste to Malcolm, but there was no trust in them yet, only attention. She had spent too many years around polished people who smiled before asking for signatures. Malcolm's calm might have been character, or it might have been practice. Celeste opened the digital visitor log on her tablet and angled it toward Evelyn. "Your nephew was here at 7:10. You were not abandoned. Mr. Reed entered after your family visit and created confusion during your recovery." The screen showed Grant Whitmore in clean black letters beside the time 7:10 p.m. Malcolm did not reach for the tablet. He looked past it instead. The guest chair remained tucked beneath the window table, its metal legs sitting inside pale rectangles in the carpet where they had rested long enough to leave an outline. The second water glass on the tray was upside down and dry. No coat hung on the wall hook. No paper cup sat in the trash. "He stayed nearly 40 minutes, Celeste added. "Then he left through the private family elevator." "That elevator's down," a maintenance worker said from the hall before continuing toward the service closet. His tool cart rattled once over the threshold strip. Celeste's fingers stopped above the tablet. "Then he may have used the stairwell." "You just said the elevator." "I said that is the usual route." Her answer came smoothly, but too quickly. Malcolm looked again at the visitor entry. The number 7 in 710 had a long hooked stroke descending beneath the line. He had seen that same hook less than a minute earlier on Celeste's paper report, where she had written room 1207 in blue ink. "Sign here," she said, placing the report on the bedside table. The wording stated that Malcolm had entered without authorization, brought a minor into a restricted zone, and interfered with patient care. He read every line. Then he drew one clean line through the admission of fault, signed only beside the recorded time, and wrote beneath it, "Entered after the patient gave verbal permission." Celeste's jaw tightened almost invisibly. "That will be reviewed." "It should be." Evelyn looked at the sentence Malcolm had added, then at the bowl he had placed where her stronger hand could reach it. He had not asked her to defend him. He had not asked what her name could do for his job. When security told him he would need to wait outside while the report was processed, Malcolm nodded, helped Noah zip his backpack, and moved toward the door without touching the blue recipe card still visible in his pocket. Behind him, Celeste closed the visitor log. For half a second, a gray system notice flashed across the tablet before she darkened the screen. Visitor entry modified. 12:14 a.m. Malcolm saw the gray notice disappear from Celeste's tablet, but he did not reach for the screen or accuse her of anything. The security officer had already opened the door, and Noah's small hand had tightened around two of Malcolm's fingers. "Dad, did she change something?" Noah whispered. "Maybe," Malcolm said, "but we don't guess when facts can be checked." He guided his son into the hall, then bent to retie the lace that had come loose on Noah's right sneaker. The fluorescent light flattened every color around them, turning the cream walls pale and the polished floor almost silver. Behind the closed door, a spoon touched porcelain once, then again. Evelyn was eating. Malcolm listened for 3 quiet seconds before standing. That sound mattered more than Celeste's report. At the service elevator, Noah opened his backpack and took out the last package of peanut butter crackers. He broke them carefully along the seam and offered the larger half to his father. "You can have it," Malcolm said. "You worked longer. You gave our dinner away." Noah's voice carried no accusation, only the simple accounting of a 9-year-old who knew what was in their refrigerator. Malcolm looked at the crackers, then at the silver wedding band resting beneath his chef's coat. Nia used to divide food the same way, always making her portion look larger by breaking it into more pieces. "Your mom would tell us to share," he said. "So we share." They ate beside the elevator in silence, each pretending not to notice how little there was. When Malcolm returned to the kitchen, Evelyn's untouched meal tray was still on the stainless steel counter. A dishwasher had begun lifting it toward the trash bin. "Hold on," Malcolm said. He turned the tray beneath the bright prep light. The barcode label showed the meal had left the kitchen at 4:31 p.m. A smaller line beneath it read "Replace after 60 minutes if uneaten." The plastic seal remained intact. There was no patient refusal sticker, no nurse's initials, and no replacement request in the printed return slip. Malcolm entered the tray number into the kitchen waste log exactly as he had found it. He did not write neglect. He did not write misconduct. He wrote, "Return sealed at 9:06 p.m. No replacement ticket attached." The supervisor glanced over his shoulder. "You planning to become a nurse now?" No. Malcolm placed the tray in the designated review refrigerator instead of the trash. "I'm doing the kitchen record. It's one cold dinner. To us." Malcolm closed the refrigerator door, the rubber seal side against the metal. To the person who didn't get another one, it was the only dinner. 20 minutes later, a call came from room 1207 requesting that Malcolm collect the soup bowl personally. Celeste stood at the nurse's station when he returned, her hands folded neatly over the same clipboard. "Ms. Whitmore seems unusually interested in you," she said. "Be careful not to confuse gratitude with permission." Malcolm met her eyes without slowing. "I only came for the bowl." Inside the room, Evelyn had eaten nearly half the soup. The cake remained untouched, but Noah's card now stood upright against the water pitcher. Malcolm noticed that she had moved the spoon to her left hand and was struggling to angle it without spilling. He raised the rolling table 2 inches, turned the bowl slightly, and folded the towel beneath its base so it would not slide. Then he stepped back. He did not take the spoon from her. He did not call for help she had not requested. Evelyn tried again. This time the spoon reached her mouth without shaking broth onto the blanket. "You noticed," she said. "It's my job to notice what makes eating harder. Most people notice what makes them look helpful." Malcolm lowered his gaze to the empty side of the bed. "That can make a person feel smaller than the illness already does." Evelyn studied him more carefully. Her eyes moved to the faded cuffs of his coat, then to the chain visible for a moment at his collar. "Your wife?" she asked. Malcolm touched the ring beneath the fabric. "She died 5 years ago, and you still wear it. I still made the promise." He did not explain further. The room held the soft mechanical pulse of the monitor and the faint smell of chicken broth. Evelyn looked toward the blue card in his apron pocket. "The soup," she said. Where did you learn it? Malcolm drew out the card, wiping one small spot of broth from its corner with his thumb. A man left this at a diner where I worked. Arthur, older gentleman, seemed lost. Didn't have his wallet. You fed him anyway? He was hungry before I knew his name. Malcolm turned the card between his fingers. He came back later and wrote something on the other side. Before he could flip it over, Evelyn's hand closed around her father's silver watch. Her voice dropped to a whisper. Feed the person before you judge the name. Malcolm stopped moving. The card remained face down in his hand, the hidden sentence pressed against his palm, while Evelyn stared at it as if a dead man had just spoken from across the room. Malcolm did not turn the card over. How did you know that? He asked. Evelyn's fingers remained wrapped around the silver watch. Because my father said it whenever someone judged a worker by a uniform. The room seemed to contract around the old card in Malcolm's hand. The monitor beside Evelyn continued its steady pulse. But Celeste's shoes stopped outside the doorway before she entered with a paper cup and a carefully arranged expression. Is something wrong? She asked. Evelyn looked at Malcolm, not at the nurse. That depends on whether he is telling me the truth. Celeste set the cup on the bedside table. Ms. Whitmore, confusion after a neurological episode is common. Familiar phrases can feel connected to people or objects that have no real relationship to them. Her explanation was calm, medically reasonable and delivered without accusation. Malcolm understood why Evelyn did not dismiss it. She knew nothing about him except that he needed his job, had brought his child onto a restricted floor, and now held an object carrying words associated with her dead father. Where was the diner? Evelyn asked. West Baltimore, near the old Route 14 stop. What table did he sit at? 6 most nights. What did he order? The first time, nothing. He said he was waiting for somebody. Malcolm paused, refusing to fill the silence with details he could not prove. I made chicken and rice soup because his hands were shaking. I don't remember what he ordered after that. Evelyn watched his face as if waiting for him to overreach. What did he say when you refused his money? Malcolm lowered his eyes to the blue card. I don't remember the exact words. Celeste folded her hands in front of her. Convenient. No, Malcolm said. Honest. The word was quiet, but it slowed the room. He crossed to the reading lamp beside the window and held the card beneath its warmer light. Grease had darkened the edges over the years, and the faded blue surface showed shallow pressure marks where someone had once written on top of it. A strip of yellowed tape covered part of the back. May I? Evelyn asked. Malcolm placed the card in her stronger hand. He had carried it through 3 apartments, 2 kitchen jobs, and the worst year after Nia died. Still, he released it without hesitation. If it belonged to your father's memory, he said, you should see it first. Evelyn worked one fingernail beneath the brittle tape. It lifted with a faint tearing sound, revealing a narrow piece of thermal paper that had been folded against the card for more than a decade. Malcolm had always assumed it was reinforcement. Under the lamp, faded black letters slowly became visible. Mabel's Diner. November 18th. Table 6. Chicken and rice soup. Near the bottom, 2 handwritten initials appeared in blue ink. A.W. A small circle had been drawn. Around Route 14. Evelyn stopped breathing for a moment. Her father had disappeared for several hours on November 18th after a bitter argument about closing 3 low-income clinics. She remembered the date because it was the last time he had missed a board dinner without telling anyone where he had gone. Celeste leaned closer. That November receipt proves nothing. No one moved. Malcolm looked at the receipt, then at Evelyn. The month was visible from where she sat, but Celeste stood behind Malcolm's shoulder, too far away and at the wrong angle to read the faded line. What did you call it? Malcolm asked. Celeste's eyes shifted to him. A receipt. You said November. The air system clicked off, leaving the room so quiet that the paper trembled audibly in Evelyn's hand. Celeste recovered quickly. I heard Ms. Whitmore mention the date. She didn't, Malcolm said. He did not accuse her of lying. He simply placed the receipt flat beneath the lamp, where every letter could be seen, and stepped back. Evelyn's expression changed not into trust, but into calculation. She photographed the front and back of the card with her phone, then sent the images to a private number Malcolm did not recognize. "My attorney," she said when Celeste asked. "Outside the company." Celeste's smile held, but one hand closed around the paper cup hard enough to crease it. Evelyn requested preservation of the hallway cameras, the visitor log audit trail, her meal records, and every change made to her access restrictions during the previous 7 days. "That is unnecessary," Celeste said. "Then it should be easy," Evelyn replied. Malcolm collected the empty soup bowl and slid the blue card back into his pocket only after Evelyn finished photographing it. He found Noah waiting with the security officer near the nurse's station, swinging 1 foot above the floor and tracing the edge of his bent birthday card with his thumb. Before Malcolm could lead him toward the elevator, Evelyn's phone chimed inside room 1207. Her attorney had verified that the serial pattern on the receipt matched a printer registered to Mabel's diner more than a decade earlier. A second message followed. Immediately, Arthur Whitmore had placed a sealed codicil into legal storage the following year. Evelyn read the attorney's message twice before lowering her phone. Arthur Whitmore had placed a sealed codicil into legal storage the year after the date printed on the diner receipt. The document could not be opened without formal authorization, but its existence changed the temperature of the room. Celeste's paper cup stopped creasing in her hand. Malcolm remained beside the door with the empty soup bowl against his hip, while Noah sat outside under the security officer's quiet watch. "Mr. Reed," Evelyn said, "I need 5 more minutes." Malcolm glanced toward his son. "As long as he stays where I can see him." "Of course." Celeste moved toward the bed. "Ms. Whitmore, legal matters can wait until you've rested. Then you may leave while I rest." Celeste's professional smile held for 1 second too long. She set the cup down, reminded Evelyn that hospital policy required staff access at all times, and stepped into the hallway without closing the door. Through the glass, Malcolm saw her stop at the nurse's station and begin typing rapidly. Evelyn reached into the drawer beside her bed and removed a white envelope. It was thick enough to hold more than a thank you card. "There are 2 months of rent in here," she said. Malcolm did not take it. "How would you know what my rent costs?" "I asked my attorney to check whether you were in financial trouble." His expression tightened, not with anger, but with the discomfort of being searched by people who considered information a form of permission. "And am I? Your payment is late." "That wasn't my question." Evelyn rested the envelope on the rolling table between them. The fluorescent light caught the clean edge of the seal. "Take it for the soup, the card, and the trouble this hospital has caused you." Malcolm looked through the doorway. Noah was rubbing the bent corner of his birthday card flat against his knee. In Malcolm's pocket, his phone had already shown the rent reminder twice that evening. He could picture the red notice beneath the magnet on their refrigerator and the nearly empty shelf behind it. "You need," Evelyn said. "Yes, ma'am." Malcolm slid the envelope back toward her. "Needing it doesn't make it mine." The air vent clicked on above them. Evelyn's hand remained on the envelope, but her eyes shifted toward him with a new kind of attention. "Then tell me where it should go." "The children's waiting room downstairs has books held together with tape. Start there." She placed the envelope back in the drawer without arguing. Then she removed a second document. This one carried the hospital letterhead and a paragraph accusing Celeste of intentionally isolating Evelyn, manipulating her medication schedule, and conspiring to make her appear mentally unfit. "Sign as a witness," Evelyn said. Malcolm read every line. "I didn't see her change your medication. You saw enough to know something is wrong. Something is wrong." He placed one finger beneath the allegation. "That doesn't make everything written here true. She tried to have you removed. That still doesn't let me testify to what I didn't witness." He drew a line through the unsupported claims and wrote only what he could stand behind. Evelyn had invited him into the room. The food tray had remained sealed beyond its replacement time. The visitor signature appeared inconsistent. Celeste had pressured him to accept responsibility for unauthorized entry. Evelyn watched him sign beneath those 4 statements and nothing more. You could make this easier for yourself, she said. Easy evidence breaks first. The door opened before she could answer. Celeste entered with the hospital compliance officer and a security supervisor carrying a tablet. Her tone remained gentle. We should all avoid turning a misunderstanding into something larger than it is. The compliance officer placed the tablet on the table. Hallway footage filled the screen. At 8:47, Malcolm appeared holding the soup while Noah carried the card. At 8:49, Evelyn visibly motioned them inside. For 13 minutes, Malcolm remained within camera range. He never opened a drawer, touched Evelyn's purse, approached her documents, or asked anyone for money. When he left, he carried only the empty tray he had brought. A chair scraped once in the hallway, then stopped. Celeste folded her hands. That confirms only that his behavior was appropriate during those 13 minutes. It confirms my statement, Malcolm said. The compliance officer opened the elevator access log. Grant Whitmore's family credential had not been used anywhere in the building that evening. Celeste explained that he had taken the private elevator. The officer switched to a service report stamped by an outside maintenance contractor. The private elevator had been locked out at 6:03 p.m. because of a failed door sensor. For several seconds, the only sound in the room was the monitor beside Evelyn's bed. Celeste looked at the screen, then at the officer. He may have used the service stairs. There is no badge entry there either, the officer said. Her composure did not collapse. It narrowed. Then perhaps the visitor log contains an administrative error. I can correct it privately. Evelyn slowly placed her hand over the tablet. No. Preserve the original. At that moment, the room phone rang. Evelyn activated the speaker. Grant's voice came through smooth and concerned. Aunt Evelyn, I heard the cook refuse to sign what we prepared. No one answered. A faint burst of restaurant music played behind his voice before he corrected himself. What the hospital prepared, I mean. Malcolm looked at Evelyn. Evelyn looked at Celeste. Celeste's hand had gone still beside the folded family visit sign. The evidence did not yet prove who had altered the records or why, but it proved three things. Malcolm had told the truth, Grant had not visited, and someone had built a false history around Evelyn's isolation. The compliance officer ordered the footage, meal records, and visitor audit trail locked against deletion. Celeste asked to handle the matter quietly. Evelyn declined. 10 minutes later, Malcolm was escorted downstairs and told his access badge would be suspended pending review. He knelt to zip Noah's coat before surrendering it. Noah looked less frightened now, though his eyes remained fixed on the dark badge in the officer's palm. Malcolm's phone vibrated with another overdue rent warning. At the same moment, Evelyn's attorney sent a final message from the legal archive. The sealed codicil contained the full name of one outside appointee, Malcolm Isaiah Reed. Malcolm Isaiah Reed. Evelyn's attorney repeated the name over the speakerphone, slower this time, while the dark screen of Malcolm's suspended badge reflected the kitchen lights downstairs. Malcolm stood beside Noah near the employee exit, one hand resting on his son's shoulder. That's my full name, he said. Upstairs, in room 1207. Evelyn looked at the faded blue recipe card beneath the reading lamp. What else is in the file? She asked. Not enough to read the appointment aloud yet, the attorney replied. But enough to know your father did not write this after a single meeting. By midnight, 3 sealed archive boxes had been transferred to a private conference room beside the VIP floor. Malcolm returned only after arranging for Mrs. Alvarez, the neighbor who had known Noah since kindergarten, to take the boy home. Before leaving, Noah pressed the bent birthday card back into his father's hand. Don't let them say she imagined us, he whispered. Malcolm tucked the card inside his coat. They won't, if the records tell the truth. Inside the conference room, the air smelled of paper, toner, and coffee that had gone cold. Evelyn sat in a wheelchair near the glass wall, a blanket across her knees. Celeste remained at the nurse's station outside, speaking quietly into her phone and watching every person who entered. The first box contained a photocopy of the blue card and the same Mabel's Diner receipt hidden beneath its tape. The second held pages from Arthur Whitmore's private journal. His handwriting crossed the paper in narrow blue lines. November 18th. Night cook fed me before asking my name. Refused payment. November 25th. Returned in ordinary clothes. He treated me no differently. December 9th. Watched him cover meals for 3 men from the shelter. He wrote their names in the kitchen log so no one could call the food missing. Malcolm read the entries without touching the pages. He came back. For 6 months, the attorney said. Sometimes twice a week. A records clerk placed old diner ledgers beside the journal. The ink had faded, but the totals remained clear. Sunday soup ingredients paid in cash. Initials, MR. No charitable reimbursement. No corporate donation. No cameras. No audience. Evelyn's hand slowly lowered onto the closed archive box. Arthur had not chosen a poor man because poverty looked noble. He had watched Malcolm when no reward existed and found the same character each time. Why didn't he tell me? Evelyn asked. Malcolm looked through the conference room glass at her reflection rather than answering too quickly. Maybe he stopped trusting people enough to speak plainly. The words hurt her because they were fair. She admitted that Arthur had spent his final years testing everyone around him instead of naming what he feared. Their last argument had been about 3 neighborhood clinics he refused to close. She had called him stubborn. He had called the board hungry. A soft vibration came from the silver watch box on Evelyn's lap. Beneath the velvet lining was an old phone she had hidden before Grant restricted her visitors. The attorney connected it to an isolated computer and opened an audio file recorded 3 nights earlier. Grant's voice emerged first, smooth and patient. Sign the temporary voting transfer, Aunt Evelyn. Let us protect the company while you recover. Then Celeste, we can correct the visitor history. By Monday, the board will believe she no longer remembers who came. A chair moved in the recording. Evelyn's voice answered, weak but clear. You mean you'll decide what I remember? The room went still. Even the printer stopped feeding paper. The next file contained a draft agreement to sell 12 community clinics to a private investment group. Attached was a compensation schedule promising Grant a personal bonus if the sale closed within 30 days of Evelyn being declared unfit. Malcolm could have demanded Grant be arrested that night. He could have taken the recording to reporters or used his name in the codicil to threaten everyone who had humiliated him. Instead, he asked the attorney to make verified copies, preserve the metadata, and notify an independent patient advocate. Behind closed doors, they'll call this a family disagreement, he said. It has to be strong enough that they can't bury her voice with mine. Outside the glass, Celeste ended her phone call and wiped one palm against her navy uniform before reaching for the door. The attorney locked the archive boxes first. A final page from the codicil lay between them, carrying the condition Arthur had written 11 years earlier. Malcolm's authority would activate only upon documented proof that Whitmore leadership had betrayed its community care mission. The false visitor log, the neglected meal, the recording, and the clinic sale were no longer separate wrongs. Together, they formed a pattern too large for a private apology, and by sunrise it would have to be placed before the board. By 7 the next morning, the conference room beside VIP room 1207 had been arranged like a place where every word would become part of the record. A compliance officer sat beneath the wall clock. An independent patient advocate waited beside Evelyn's wheelchair. Hospital counsel, nursing representatives, Grant Whitmore, and 2 members of the corporate board faced one another across a polished table that reflected the cold ceiling lights. Malcolm entered last, wearing the same charcoal chef's coat he had worn when Celeste blocked the door. His cuffs were faded, his eyes were tired, and his employee badge was no longer clipped to his chest. Grant watched him take the chair nearest the exit. This should never have become a public spectacle, Grant began. My aunt suffered a neurological event. Ms. Pike protected her privacy, and Mr. Reed, while perhaps well-intentioned, crossed professional boundaries during a period of financial hardship. His voice was measured, almost compassionate. A frightened employee saw a wealthy patient and misread ordinary procedures as wrongdoing. Several eyes shifted toward Malcolm. He did not defend his rent record or explain the overdue notice on his phone. He placed the faded blue recipe card on the table, beside Noah's bent birthday card, and folded his hands. Evelyn remained silent. She had asked to hear what everyone would say when they believed her judgment could still be questioned. The compliance officer began. With the meal record, the barcode from Evelyn's untouched tray appeared on the wall screen. Prepared at 4:31 p.m. Returned sealed at 9:06. No refusal signature. No replacement order. Celeste kept her posture straight. That was a documentation failure, not neglect. Ms. Whitmore verbally declined the meal. To whom? Evelyn asked. Celeste paused. The assigned nurse. The staffing log showed no assigned nurse had entered room 1207 during that period. A chair leg scraped softly, then stopped. Grant leaned forward. One missing notation does not prove a conspiracy. For a moment, his explanation seemed to settle the room. Hospitals made clerical mistakes. Employees forgot initials. A cold tray could be incompetence rather than intention. Then the patient advocate placed the family visit sign beneath the document camera. Celeste's electronic authorization and Evelyn's patient code appeared on the screen. This was created at 6:52 p.m., the advocate said. Who was visiting? Mr. Grant Whitmore. Celeste opened the visitor log. The entry showed his name at 7:10. Grant spread one hand across the table. There. I came to see my aunt. I used the family elevator, and I left when she became tired. It was the first retention turn, the simple explanation that could reduce everything to poor record-keeping and a resentful employee. Malcolm looked at the visitor entry but did not raise his voice. May I ask one question? The room quieted. He pointed to the time. If Mr. Whitmore entered at 7:10, why was his name added after midnight? The compliance officer opened the audit trail. Visitor entry modified. 12:14 a.m. appeared across the screen. The account belonged to Celeste Pike. Celeste's thumb rubbed once against the edge of her folder. The system may have delayed synchronization. It didn't, the hospital's information security manager said. The entry was manually created. Grant's counsel objected that Grant could still have visited even if the record had been entered later. The hallway camera was played next. At 6:55, Celeste hung the family visit sign. At 7:10, the corridor remained empty. At 8:47, Malcolm arrived carrying the soup while Noah held the handmade card. Evelyn visibly invited them inside. No one else entered. The family elevator has no camera, Grant said. The maintenance service log appeared beside the footage. The elevator had been locked at 6:03 because of a failed door sensor. Then I took the stairs, Grant replied. The badge reader showed no entry there either. His calm expression remained, but the hand resting on his legal pad had begun pressing hard enough to whiten the fingertips. Celeste said the visitor entry had been created to correct an innocent misunderstanding. Evelyn turned toward her. You corrected the truth into something that never happened. Celeste's voice tightened. We needed the board to see you weren't alone. The words landed before she could reshape them. The patient advocate slowly lowered her pen. Malcolm looked at Evelyn, not at Celeste. I'm not here to punish anyone for embarrassing me, he said. I'm here because a false record can take a person's voice away, and once it does, every locked door starts looking reasonable. Grant tried one final time to regain the room. He said Malcolm had noticed ordinary kitchen details and built a larger story because his name had somehow appeared in Arthur Whitmore's papers. Evelyn's attorney connected the old phone to the conference speakers. Grant's recorded voice filled the room. Sign the temporary voting transfer. Then Celeste's followed. By Monday, the board will believe she no longer remembers who came. No one interrupted the recording. When it ended, Evelyn placed her palm beside the blue card. You manufactured my silence, she said. The hospital froze Malcolm's disciplinary case, preserved every record, and referred the evidence to independent compliance counsel. Grant was ordered not to contact Evelyn without her advocate present. Yet he still managed a thin smile. Even if Arthur mentioned this man, a hospital cook cannot control Whitmore Health Systems. Evelyn's attorney stood. That is not what the codicil gives him. Through the glass wall, A bonded courier approached carrying a locked black case from Arthur Whitmore's law firm. Inside it lay the sealed document scheduled to be opened before the full board. On the 32nd floor, and the page bearing Malcolm Isaiah Reed's name. The bonded courier placed the locked black case at the center of the glass boardroom table, and Arthur Whitmore's attorney broke the seal in full view of the cameras. 32 floors below, Baltimore moved behind the windows in pale morning light, but inside the room no one looked away from the cream-colored document sliding from its envelope. Grant Whitmore sat near the head of the table with his legal counsel on one side and the unsigned clinic sale agreement on the other. Evelyn waited in her wheelchair beside an independent patient advocate. Malcolm stood at the far end, his charcoal chef's coat visible beneath an old navy jacket, the faded blue recipe card resting in his palm. He had not been offered a seat. He had not asked for one. The attorney confirmed the document number, the 11-year-old notarization date, and the unbroken chain of custody. Then he began reading. I appoint Malcolm Isaiah Reed as independent steward of the Whitmore Community Trust. Grant's pen slipped from his fingers and struck the tabletop once. The sound was small, but in the sudden stillness it carried the length of the room. One board member slowly removed her glasses. Another turned toward Malcolm as though seeing him for the first time. The attorney continued. Arthur had not left Malcolm a mansion, personal fortune, or executive title. He had given him stewardship over a trust holding enough voting shares to suspend any transaction that threatened Whitmore Health System's community care mission. The authority would activate only when documented evidence showed leadership had abandoned that mission or manipulated a vulnerable officer to gain control. On the screen behind the attorney appeared the evidence in order. The untouched meal tray returned without a refusal record, the family visit sign created through Celeste Pike's account, Grant's visitor entry added after midnight, the empty hallway footage, the locked family elevator, the recording from Evelyn's old phone, and the draft agreement to sell 12 neighborhood clinics. The final page displayed the diner receipt attached to the blue recipe. Card. November 18th. Table 6. Chicken and rice soup. Arthur's initials. Grant stood halfway from his chair. This is absurd. My grandfather met hundreds of employees, vendors, drivers, cooks. Mr. Reed was not an employee of Whitmore, the attorney said, and Arthur did not make this decision after one meal. Copies of the journal entries appeared on the screen. 6 months of observations. Malcolm feeding men from a shelter. Malcolm paying for ingredients himself. Malcolm refusing repayment when no cameras, executives, or family members were present. Grant's voice dried in his throat. He has no governance credentials. The attorney turned another page. Arthur had anticipated that objection. The trust was required to provide independent legal counsel, financial training, and external auditing so character would not be confused with technical expertise, and technical expertise could not be used to replace character. Evelyn looked across the table at Malcolm. Her father had not chosen him because he was poor. He had chosen him because poverty, exhaustion, grief, and invisibility had never persuaded him to treat another human being as less worthy. Grant reached for the clinic agreement, but the chairwoman of the special committee placed her hand over it. The sale is frozen effective immediately. Another director announced that Grant's voting authority would be suspended pending an independent investigation into coercion, falsified records, and undisclosed financial incentives. Hospital counsel confirmed that Celeste Pike had been removed from supervisory duty and that the visitor logs, access files, and patient care records had been referred to outside compliance investigators. Evelyn's capacity would be evaluated by physicians with no connection to Grant, the board, or Whitmore Health Systems. Grant looked toward the cameras, then away. His legal folder slid several inches from beneath his hand, spilling one page onto the floor. No one bent to retrieve it. Malcolm remained standing. He did not smile. He did not look at the men and women who had discussed his rent, his uniform, and his worth as though he were absent. He placed the blue recipe card on the polished table. "Feed the person before you judge the name," he read. The ventilation system whispered above them. Somewhere beyond the glass, an elevator bell rang. Inside the boardroom, no chair moved and no one found a reply. When the attorney asked whether Malcolm accepted the appointment, he breathed once before answering. He would accept only if patients received representation on the trust. Frontline nurses and workers held a rotating seat. Every proposed clinic closure became public record, and Evelyn's rights were restored through an independent process rather than family influence. The conditions were entered into the minutes. The vote passed without Grant. Only then did Malcolm's phone vibrate inside his pocket. A message from Mrs. Alvarez showed Noah waiting backstage for his school performance. Wearing the blue shirt Malcolm had ironed the night before, Evelyn watched Malcolm read it. "What do you want first?" she asked softly. Malcolm looked at the boardroom, the sealed will, and the people now waiting for his decision. Then he slipped the recipe card back into his pocket. "My time," he said. The boardroom emptied without applause. Grant Whitmore left between his attorney and an outside compliance officer, his voting access suspended before the elevator doors closed. Celeste Pike's supervisory credentials were disabled that same morning, and every visitor log, meal record, phone file, and access report connected to Evelyn's isolation was transferred beyond Whitmore's control. Malcolm did not watch either of them leave. He was already moving toward the school auditorium, still wearing his charcoal chef's coat beneath the navy jacket he had owned for years. He reached the auditorium just as the lights dimmed. Noah stood on the second riser in his blue shirt, searching the rows until he found his father near the aisle. The tension left the boy's shoulders. He did not know the language of trusts, voting shares, or independent investigations. He only knew his father had kept his promise to come. 3 weeks later, St. Catherine's corrected Malcolm's personnel file. The accusation of unauthorized access was removed, his suspended wages were restored, and the hospital issued a written apology before the kitchen, nursing, and facilities teams. Malcolm listened without lowering his head or making the administrators suffer through their embarrassment. When the chief operating officer offered him an immediate management title, Malcolm declined. "I'll take the opportunity after I earn the training," he said. He returned to the kitchen, completed his nutrition management certification at night, and joined the Community Trust's governance program with the same notebook he used for inventory counts. Evelyn's independent medical evaluation confirmed that she remained capable of making her own decisions. She returned to work on a reduced schedule, no longer allowing family members or executives to control access to her under the language of protection. Her first policy created an independent patient advocate who answered neither to hospital leadership nor to a patient's relatives. Her second protected frontline employees who reported neglect, altered records, or retaliation. The sale of the 12 neighborhood clinics was canceled. Grant was formally removed after the investigation documented coercion, undisclosed financial incentives, and falsified records. His case was referred to regulators and prosecutors, not tried through gossip or public revenge. Celeste lost her management position after the nursing board reviewed the audit trail and the role she had played in manufacturing Evelyn's isolation. Malcolm never used his new authority to demand harsher punishment. "Evidence should decide the consequence," he told the Trust Council. "Not my anger." Months later, the Whitmore Community Trust opened the first open table center inside one of the clinics Grant had planned to sell. It offered warm meals for caregivers, independent visitors for isolated patients, legal guidance on patient rights, and training grants for hospital workers seeking advancement. Noah drew the program's first logo, 3 bowls arranged around one table. His picture was printed on the children's menu, not placed in a boardroom as though he had solved the adults' failures. The faded blue recipe card sat in a simple frame beside the kitchen window, but the original still belonged to Malcolm. The grease marks, worn tape, and faded handwriting were no longer signs of an object too ordinary to matter. They were proof that something small could carry the truth safely for 11 years. Evelyn began visiting Malcolm and Noah without an assistant. She did not arrive with expensive gifts. Sometimes she brought library books. Sometimes she sat at the kitchen table while Noah practiced spelling words. Trust came slowly, through ordinary evenings in which no one asked for signatures and no one checked the value of the room before deciding how politely to behave. She never tried to replace Nia. Malcolm still wore his wife's ring on the chain beneath his shirt, and Evelyn respected the silence around that grief instead of trying to fill it. On the night of the open table dedication, Evelyn attended Noah's school performance carrying the paper ticket he had given her. He had saved a chair beside Malcolm. When she sat down, Noah smiled, then turned his attention back to the stage like a child who finally trusted the adults to remain where they had promised. Later, in Malcolm's small apartment, 3 bowls of chicken and rice soup rested on the table. Evelyn looked at the extra chair and said, "Your son saved me a seat." Malcolm placed a spoon beside her bowl. "He does that for people he expects to stay." For a moment, no one spoke. It was not the stunned silence of a boardroom losing its power. It was the quiet of 3 people understanding that grief could remain without keeping every door closed. Noah began telling Evelyn about school. Malcolm listened, the blue recipe card lying beside the salt shaker and the silver ring resting over his heart. Dignity had never needed a louder voice. Kindness had simply waited until the truth was strong enough to carry it into justice.